Most NPC behavior in games is shit. Like, just look at this basic bitch enemy I made over here for my dungeon crawler. He just runs in the direction of the nearest player and attacks when he gets close. He can't even pathfind. Pathetic little shit. But how many times have you seen some variant of this in a game? Even in AAA games, they often just add pathfinding and a more complicated player detection system on top of this basic algorithm and call it a day. What you want in enemy AI is for it to be believable as an intelligent being, while also inspiring a fun playstyle from the player. But the types of things that would make them either more intelligent or just straight more interesting to play against are often hard to implement and also processor intensive. In fact, even the basic run at player until you get close and then attack thing can have a lot more to it than meets the eye. Even the example of Skyrim I gave earlier, the AI in that game is actually pretty impressive when you break it down. But the fundamental issue is just that as soon as you make something look like a person, the standards of intelligence are just raised so much. If it looks like a person, it'll act like a person, and people are complicated. Now, unless you're a wizard, there's not much we can do about these technical limitations. But what if, just maybe, another big issue is just a lack of imagination? I think there are actually a lot of simple tricks to making enemies funner to play against. They don't actually involve increasing complexity dramatically. One huge problem with a lot of enemy AI is a lack of self-preservation. If the character is actually supposed to be either stupid or suicidal or just plain cocky, then it makes sense for them to just charge right at the player, no matter what. But you only need to ask yourself, what is the actual intended personality of this character? The behavior of NPCs is actually one of the most powerful tools a game has for expression, because it controls the behavior of most of the characters in your game. So maybe we should look at it less as a way of challenging the player or facilitating gameplay, more as a way of expressing a personality. For example, right now I'm working on the enemies to replace those placeholder enemies. Instead I made these cowardly scamps that will run away unless you outnumber them. The way this works is that the scamps have an area of awareness, so that they'll always be counting players and other scamps within. They have 3 different states: idle, fight, and flight. The balance of players to scamps determines which one it does. The fight section is mostly copy and pasted from the basic bitch enemy from before, and it wasn't that hard to implement the other states. It did cause an issue where if you have a scamp here and then a scamp here, and then a player over here, then the scamp in the middle will run towards the other scamp, then getting in range of him and seeing, oh wait, I have friends, and then he'll try to charge back at the player, but then he'll run out of range of the other scamp, and back and back and back, and it looks ugly. But in the spirit of simple solutions, I fixed this by making them dumber. The scamps have timers where they only recount allies every seconds now. They still get caught in loops of run, fight, run, but it happens slow enough that it feels more natural. Now let's compare the scamps with the basic bitch enemies from before. They have most everything in common, yet the scamps are just more interesting. They're not much fun when they're alone because they just run away, but they make good horde enemies. Once we had the wimpy minions in place, it was only natural to give them bosses. We'll call them taskmasters. I made it where when they see a scamp, they'll make them fight. They have an area of awareness, so it'll be a code. Mostly because I think it'd be funny if the scamps disobey them behind their backs. And I like the idea of the bosses being less perceptive than their minions. Now that's a key to believable NPCs, just to have the bosses be dumber than their subordinates. Just like real life. The taskmasters will also have 3 states. They'll have a command state where when there are scamps in the area, then they'll make them fight the players. Then they have an attack state for when there are no scamps in the area, but there are players, and so they actually have to fucking do something for themselves for once. And then there'll be a wonder state for when none of those are true, and then they have to just wander around blindly looking for somebody's day to ruin. Now none of these actually wind up being clearly separated in the script. Sometimes it's better to do what makes sense and is most efficient, rather than obsess over making your code fit into neat sections or match some diagram you drew up earlier. Commanding the scamps to fight is simple as artificially raising the ally count variable of any scamps within the cone of vision. So I didn't actually have to change anything in the scamp script to create this synergy. I imagine the taskmaster is using whips, so I had it where they can just damage everything in their cone of view when they attack. They will contrast well with the other enemies by doing low damage but having a large range and a big knockback. Now, the wonder state, which to be honest, I just kind of added as an afterthought, turned out to be the hardest part of the entire thing. I mean, one of them would be dumb, but... Okay, so the basic idea of what's supposed to happen is that they walk in the direction they were already facing, turning away from any walls that happen to come in their path. But of course, this It's not that simple, is it? I tried making them turn away from the average position of all the obstacles they can see at a given time. But like, for example, if they're going into a corner, then the average position of both the walls will actually be behind them, and so they'll just keep going in a straight line. The only consistent way I found of stopping this was just having them choose a single obstacle that they can see at a given time to turn away from and just like 180 immediately, which looks terrible, and sometimes they get caught between two obstacles when they're in small spaces, but what are you gonna do? So there you go. This is almost fun now. So to sum it all up, some simple tricks to improve your enemies are: give them a reasonable sense of self-preservation. Think about your NPCs as characters and their AI as being their personality. Don't assume rank and intelligence are correlated, and give them unique interactions with one another. And of course the list just goes on. Feel free to add anything to it down below in the comments if you have anything you like to see in your enemies. But I think the key to improving anything that you feel just needs a little bit of something is just stopping to think about it in the first place. There's just so many things you can do with NPC behavior, and I'm tired of phoning it in. Subscribe if you agree.